We got two speakers. We got Benjamin Leader, and we've got Yair 840. Let's hear from Benjamin and then Yair.
Yeah, just curious, who founded Palestine? Who was did they have a king or a leader of some kind? Does anybody know?
The notion of a state of Palestine was created in accordance with the principles enshrined in the UN of the national right to self-determination. And the Palestinian state and the Palestinian people decided that they were Palestinian. They wanted a Palestinian state, which was their right because they were the people living on that land. And this is this form of national self-determination they elected to pursue.
When did they elect to pursue that?
Why don't you get to the point of your rhetorical questions so we can just see what your point is?
I was just trying to figure out if anybody knew. I've asked some of these same questions before, and nobody seems to be able to answer them straight. So if you don't know, then that's okay.
Okay, well, the land on historical maps was called Palestine for a very long time. After World War I, there was a sense of kind of holistic Arab identity. There's various different Arab dynasties like the Hashemites in Jordan and others that laid claim to being the leader of all the Arabs. But through the course of the development of the national right of self-determination, the notion of a Palestinian state arose, just like a Syrian state arose and a Jordanian state arose, and so on and so forth. I mean, your question, I think the point you're trying to get at is that the name of the state of Palestine or the notion of a Palestinian state is rather recent. Well, that's true for every single state in the Middle East. The difference, of course, is that these are states created by the actual people who have been living there for centuries and millennia, as opposed to the Zionist project, which was created from scratch and which has no organic basis in any community whatsoever.
Okay, I think you shut him down with that one. Um, what I don't get is why the Israelis think they can just do this terrorism against the civilians in Gaza day in day out and not expect a response. The only way this is going to end is through the establishment of a Palestinian state. That's what Putin says. He's 100% correct, and I don't think that you can deprive people of their lands, their right to access water, electricity, internet, food, so on and so forth, aid, medical aid, and expect there not to be a fight. And that's what we're seeing right now. And I think it should be expected.
And you think that Hamas has a chance in this fight?
100%. I mean, I think they 100% have prepared for this for years with probably the Iranians, with Hezbollah, and the idea that the IDF, with their $2 million missiles, can't stop a few homemade rockets from entering the Tel Aviv airspace is reason number one to point to the fact that it's not going to be a clean-cut, decisive victory for the Israelis. And I think that, I mean, I wouldn't. The last thing I'd want to be on this earth right now is one of those homosexual TikTok reservists that's about to be sent into the sniper's nest, the booby trap infested, drone ridden region on this earth known as Gaza right now. That'd be the last person I'd want to be, is one of those Israeli soldiers. They did two probing operations. In the first one, all of the American men and IDF soldiers they lost. They were cut up to bits by Hamas. Last night they did another probing operation and they lost one of their special forces soldiers. I really don't think this is going to be that easy.
So Hamas doesn't need support? Is that what you're saying? They got this covered?
Well, I think your question is a little bit dishonest. Hamas obviously has been supported by the regional and indigenously regional forces for a very long time, as opposed to Israel, which would not exist without a country that exists on the other side of the world, America. I mean, America has no historical connection to that land, and yet this parasitic, inorganic state requires an entirely alien and foreign country in order just to exist. I mean, imagine Israel without America.
Where did those AK-47s come from?
They came from, where do you mean? And it was designed, if you're saying it's from the Russians, that's not true because they're technically made and manufactured outside. The blueprints were created by the Russians, if that's your argument. But
I mean,
even if it
Hamas came on RT and said that they proudly stated that they had a license to manufacture Kalashnikov
Okay,
ammunition.
so you're getting into some squibble about intellectual property. That's just silly.
Well, without Russia's support, I guess they wouldn't exist either, huh?
That's not necessary. I mean, even if that was true, that would still be a more organic form of support than the United States, which literally has
What's the
absolutely
difference
no
between
ties.
Russia selling Hamas, weapons, and us selling Israel weapons? What's the
Because we
difference?
don't just sell them weapons, we give them to them for free. Is Israel purchasing the supply of Iron Dome missiles from the United States? Get real, man. We're not selling them anything. We're just giving them it for free. And if we are selling them anything, it's at such a ridiculous discount that we don't
What
benefit
year?
from it
What
in any
year was
way.
it that Russia finally paid off their Lend-Lease debt? Was that late
Lend
two
lease,
thousands?
lend 80% of lend lease did not even arrive in the Soviet Union until after 1943,
And why did it take them so long to pay it off?
when all of the major decisive battles had already been won. It only comprised about 4% of the total supplies the Red Army actually used
Yeah, but why did
against the
it take them
Nazis.
so long to pay
So,
it
so,
off?
so lend lease was primarily used for reconstruction purposes and to feed the populations, not for war. After the war, lend lease is not used for the reason you think it was. Don't be silly. Don't walk into this
And
space
if you're gonna
uneducated and
if you're gonna
embarrass
have
yourself.
a debate about paying off debt, look no further than the United States, who has one of the highest debt to GDP ratios on the face of the earth, much, much, much higher than the Russians, much higher.
Yeah, I hear
And
that thrown around a lot, Jackson. But
it's not thrown around; it's
what's how
simply
much
a fact.
equity is in the United States?
It's simply a
What's our
fact.
debt to equity?
I have no idea what our debt to equity is. I don't have that off the top of my head, and I'm sure you don't either. But at the end of the day, if you're going to make a debate about paying off debt, the United States has the most debt. So the other point that you brought up is that Hamas has the license to manufacture certain goods on Russian blueprints. Israel can't even launch a simple probing operation or launch airstrikes on Hamas right now without two full U.S. carrier strike groups in the Eastern Mediterranean. They can't even do that.
You
They
think
have to
that
have
those strike groups are there for Hamas?
100%. Why else do you think they just sent them this week?
Oh, come on, Jackson. You
Why do,
know
why
this
do you
is
think they
connected.
sent them? Why do you think they sent them?
You were all against the Ukrainians a few weeks ago. The Black Sea is connected to the Mediterranean Sea, right?
Yes, and Russia has their MiGs flying over the Black Sea right now with hypersonic missiles that the U.S. doesn't have that can reach those two U.S. carrier strike groups. So
And
why
I
so
don't
why do you
think I
think
don't think any
why
sailors
do you
on
why
board
do you
those ships
why
are
do you no,
nervous.
I have a simple question for you. Why do you think the U.S. just so happened to send over these U.S. carrier strike groups with about 12,000 men this week? You think it was just because, or do you think they did it for a certain reason?
I think it's a part of a larger escalation. I think that Israel
What's
and
the
Ukraine
escalation?
are two fronts of the same war. Obviously,
What's the escalation?
once Putin secures Sevastopol, assuming that he does, the next step is going to be able to.
What do you mean once he secures Sevastopol? What do you mean once he secures Sevastopol? When have the Russians not had Sevastopol in the last 18 months? Okay, so clearly very, in terms of modern history, historically illiterate. So you said that it was an escalation that caused the U.S. to send those two U.S. carrier strike groups. What escalation?
Well, that's we had to go off on that tangent. Once he secures it to where his liking, the next step is going to be to secure the Mediterranean Sea, and then from there to make it out the Straits of Gibraltar. Because what Putin's trying to do here is simple. All the old Soviet client states, are still using Soviet era equipment. They've got T-90s now that they were never able to ship out because of the collapse. They've got T-14s now. Their client states want these. In order to get them there, they got to get them on ships. You know, Sevastopol is the port that they use to arm all their client states in the past, and if they're going to arm all their client states again, they need Sevastopol.
Hold on, Benjamin. Who do you imagine is a client state of Russia?
Everyone that has AK-47s,
Yeah, that's. I'm sorry, Benjamin. I'm sorry,
T-72s. You can
Benjamin.
only buy those from one place, man.
Benjamin, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Azov battalion in Ukraine also uses AK-47s. So AK-47s is a really low bar to define what constitutes a Russian
You know
client state.
well Ukraine is a former Soviet state, and that's why they have them.
Benjamin, yeah, I'm aware, but there's also reasons why the Axis of Resistance has AK-47s, or why China, for that matter, has their own version of the AK-47. That's due to historical reasons and not necessarily because they are
Yeah,
client states of the present-day Russian Federation. That is such
Do Russia and China not trade weapons? Do they not sell each other weapons? They not exchange?
Exchange is not a form of being a client state of another. Okay, if you think China is a client state of the Russian Federation,
Not anymore. But when the communists were first taking over in China, they had to get their weapons from somewhere, and they got them.
And
from Russia.
even then, the People's Republic of China was so fiercely independent from the Soviet Union that it actually culminated in the Sino-Soviet split, which had the China align itself with the United States after the 1970s against the Soviets. So clearly you don't know your history if you think that having some kind of historical relation to the Soviets and the Cold War means we're still living in the bipolar world. Now, if you actually want to say that the reason the U.S. carriers are there because they fear a bigger power, it's not Russia, it's Iran, an actual regional pull, an actual regional civilization, which has organic historical ties to the region, which, yes, I very much do imagine the United States wants
Hassan,
to
on a
threaten.
scale of 1 to 10, 10 being best buddies, I guess 1 being enemies, how would you rate Iran and Russia's relationship?
Right now, in all honesty, right now it's a 7 or 8. Russia and Iran have different interests. Sometimes those interests can align, but Iran is very much has its own self-interest and is not a puppet or client of Russia or any other state of that matter. I mean, if you want to make any argument,
Hassan, I'm not saying that anybody's a robot here. They all have.
Iran is not a client of Russia. Now, if anything, Iran is somewhat economically dependent on China, but even then, I see no evidence of any political clientelism whatsoever that erodes the sovereignty of Iran. And the fact that Iran is a regional pole.
I didn't say anything about eroding sovereignty, but they're partners.
Benjamin, I think the issue is that you're framing this in terms of the Cold War era bipolar world, where it's the United States versus the Soviet Union. But right now, we have a multipolar world where there are different regional and civilizational poles, each with their own interests and their own realities. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the client of some grand evil empire.
When I say client, I'm not meaning all of what you just said. I simply means, like, if I buy something from you, I'm a client. Let's say I bought some advice from you, I'm a client, right?
It wouldn't actually surprise me if there was an exchange of military, if Russia was selling things to Israel as well.
That wouldn't surprise me either.
So is Israel a client of Russia as well, and vice versa?
Israel has been a client of Russia in the past. I do believe they've purchased some things from them, and there has been some exchange. It seems like the relationship's a little tense right now, but who knows? They could be a client again. If Russia has good equipment, I'm sure people would buy it, right? If you're going to buy,
it sounded like you're changing the definition of client to just to someone Russia is selling to rather than a proxy, which is what it sounded like. Because the idea that the United
States, say proxy.
Well, the idea that the United States is sending warships to the region because of Russia, I think, is really far-fetched. I think it's clear that this is a message to the Muqawama, and in this case, Hamas at this moment, and then in the future, Hezbollah and Iran. I think that's very clear.
But Russia has offered support in this equation, as Jackson mentioned, with the missiles and the planes. So we can't act like they're not a part of this. And are we to believe that Putin just wants to play in the Black Sea and doesn't want to spread out into the oceans of the world? He just wants to stay there.
I really do believe Putin is far more preoccupied with the region in which Russia exists in than the Middle East region.
Okay, let's bring in our next speaker. Benjamin, you can continue to stay in chat if you want. Let's bring in Yair840. So, what do you think about this whole situation with Hamas, the invasion, the war? You got to unmute. Okay, if you can't unmute, then we'll bring in our next speaker. By the way, anyone who's applying to join, make sure you're a Zionist because we're debating Zionists. Okay, Crypto. Crypto has got some pro-Israel stuff on his account. Let's hear what you have to say about the Hamas invasion.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say that no soldiers has been kidnapped or taken in yesterday's raid. I'm an ex-IDF soldier in the Givati Brigade. I'm actually a reservist right now. I'm on standby. I'm not on base. But no soldiers has been kidnapped, so I don't know where you got this BS information from, in my opinion. And I mean, you guys just haven't answered any of Benjamin's questions that he's been saying as well. So I don't know where all this bullshit is coming from. And you were also saying about homosexuals. There's so many homosexuals and queers that are actually for like Gaza and Palestine, but the second they step in Gaza, they will literally get decapitated. So
I want to just immediately interject here and say that I don't. That may be true in the West, but that's not why the U.S. is sending carriers to the region, because the entire combined Arab and Muslim world is far more the reason why Palestinians have support than whoever you're talking about. So this is a complete deflection. This is just some internal political nonsense of U.S. domestic politics. It's not relevant to the conflict whatsoever. And whatsoever. If those were the only people supporting the Palestinians would not exist anymore. So there's no need to talk about them.
And I'll just say that the source that was the case, that these IDF soldiers and Americans were killed, it actually came from former President Donald Trump's senior advisor to the Pentagon, a man they tried to make Secretary of Defense. That's Colonel Douglas McGregor, and he's the source on that. So take it up, I guess, with the Pentagon if you have a problem with that source. But he was the one that said that those soldiers were killed, actually. So you're maybe ex-IDF reservist, not on base, whatever, but that's what the officials in Washington have to say.
That was not yesterday.
Does McGregor actually work for the Pentagon? I kind of suspect that's not true.
Like I just said, he was President Donald Trump's senior advisor to the Pentagon.
You know what's funny? You're Republican. You must be a big Trump supporter, but Trump is such a big supporter of Israel.
I'm actually a communist.
That makes a lot of sense now.
So, what do you think about this Hamas invasion? I mean, I think that it was to be expected, and I think that everything that Israel's putting out right now surrounding raped babies, beheaded babies, it's a bunch of bogus. There's no evidence. There's no proof. It's all a bunch of Zionist lies. And Israel's going to, if they provoke a full Arab conflict and if they provoke Iran, they're going to get absolutely crushed.
Let me ask.
There's actually so much evidence out there. You just don't wanna believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I have videos. I have videos. If you actually want me to send them to you, I don't post them because I'm pretty sure they violate terms of service. But I want to ask: does Hamas have a plan? Is this Hamas's plan? Do they have a plan?
I think I want to briefly try to answer that and say that you have to understand that the war never ended. So when you say, do they have a plan? The plan is the emancipation and liberation of their own people, because Gaza is an open-air prison, and they have not just been living willy-nilly, attending to their business. They can't live in Gaza. It's not hospitable to, in the long term, any real human life.
Don't the Egyptians control one side of that prison gate?
But here's the problem with that. Assume the Egyptians allow all the people of Gaza to evacuate to Egypt. Now you have an ethnic cleansing where they cannot return to their homes. Why should they cede their homes, even if they're living in intolerable conditions, to a foreign occupier? Let's put this in American terms for all the
I don't
American.
know.
Hold on.
Okay, go
You have
ahead.
to shut up for a sec. Yeah. Let's put this in American terms for all the American patriots here. Let's say a foreign power came and occupied your neighborhood and said, you have to flee and you have to evacuate and you're never allowed to come back to your home, and we're creating a new state instead. How many patriotic Americans would rather die for their land, let alone sit and suffer and continue to fight, than evacuate and leave with their tail between their legs? All American patriots can understand the sacred duty to defend your homeland, because life is not just about defending your biological subsistence. It's about defending your right to existence, which includes a far more broader category of human dignity, of civilization and culture than just subsisting and smoking pot and watching pornography and being the kind of Nietzschean last man. So don't sit here and tell me that the people of Gaza should, instead of fighting, flee to Egypt or Jordan or somewhere else. That is their home, and they have a sacred right to defend their homeland.
I never said that, though. I'm just addressing the notion that it's a prison because it has walls and people can't travel past those walls, and that Egypt does control one of those walls. That does not equate to, okay, everyone who lives in Gaza needs to now go to Egypt and
well, to be clear, it's not just a prison because they're confined. It's also a prison because they are deprived of access to the basic amount of goods and services befitting of an not just modern developed country, but just a country, period. So, yes, it's a prison. Yes, they're being choked out to rot and die and decay.
Is Egypt complicit in this deprivation?
The Egyptian government is complicit in it because it's sold out to the Zionists and to the imperialists. That doesn't mean Egypt is just as illegitimate as the fake state of Israel, but it does mean that the Egyptian government has sold out both the Egyptian people and the Palestinian people and the Arab people as a whole to Israel. Nobody sits here and thinks of Egypt as a pillar of the resistance in the region. They sold out a long time ago when Sadat signed his treaty with the Israelis. So I don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about, oh, is Egypt complicit?
I mean, the way you made it sound, like I would assume that the Egyptians are enemies of the Palestinian people.
But they are only complicit insofar as they are an accomplice of the Zionist project. Were there no Zionist project whatsoever, we wouldn't be talking about accomplices. This is like asking, are some capos complicit in the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews? Yes, they are complicit. But were it not for the criminal acts of the Nazis, we wouldn't be talking about Nazi accomplices. So this is the comparison you're bringing. Bringing up Egypt is completely irrelevant here.
I don't think it is, because we have Egypt to one side, we have Israel to the other, and we have the sea on another side. Now, I understand that they only have access to 3 miles out. That's correct, right? That's a talking point that if I were a Gazan, I'd be talking about, getting maybe a little bit more than 3 miles out. But assuming that they had a normal maritime border, what would the difference be? What do you think they need, and who is depriving them?
Why should the Egyptians be expected to bring in 2 million Gazans? That's my question.
Nobody said that.
Well, yeah, you are. You're saying that it's not an open air prison because they have a border with Egypt.
No, I'm saying that you could get goods in from the sea.
You can't get goods in because Israel's bombing the Rafah crossing.
That may be the case right now, but but they're not. They're not bombing the ocean. They're not. I mean, they are able to get stuff in. They have been able to get stuff in.
Okay,
Hamas doesn't appear to be investing in infrastructure.
So no sane insurance company is going to insure a ship to try and bring in aid through the sea right now. I mean, that would just be ludicrous. No one's going to insure that. So no ships are going to be entering, on the coastline. And the Rafah crossing is being bombed by Israel. Egypt, they shouldn't be expected to bring in 2 million Gazans. and the Gazans shouldn't be expected to, leave their Palestinian land. So yes, it is a prison, and I don't see why,
Okay,
the
here's
fact
the
that they have a
question.
border with another
Jackson,
country changes
Haas.
anything.
Okay, let's say Gaza kept the same border. Same border, they didn't have to leave. How do we make it not a prison?
The existence of the Zionist entity is incompatible as it stands. I mean, the demand is a return to the 67 borders as a minimum of the creation of a Palestinian state. This is also Hamas's demand at the present. If you don't do that, we can't, there's nothing else to talk about.
So
That
this
is
isn't
what
about
is
food,
that's the goal.
water, goods and services, or anything like that at all, is it?
Of course it is. It attests to the illegitimacy of the criminal Zionist state that they have to resort to these anti-human means just in order to exist. In order for the Zionist project to be fulfilled, there has to be such a human toll. There has to be such a cost to the detriment of human life and dignity. So when we point out the crimes of the Zionist state, of all these things that they're doing,
I haven't seen
it's
the
proof.
Zionist founding documents where it says that. I have seen Hamas's founding documents where it says they want to kill all the Jews. But where in the quote unquote Zionist founding documents does it say what you're talking about, man?
It is a inevitable consequence that the Zionists had 100% foreknowledge of establishing a Zionist state, and they knew it before any Zionist state was established.
Superpowers, they have a time machine. How did they know?
Because it doesn't take 2 and 2 to put together, in the midst of all the conflicts they had with the local Arab population as well, that they are not going to be able to realize the state they want to unless it comes to the detriment of the people already living there. And they were fully aware of that.
Then why haven't they been bombing Palestine constantly for the last 15 years like they have the last couple of weeks?
They can't afford to.
Each one of those, just to put it in perspective, each one of the Iron Dome missiles that Israel launches up is being fired against a Hamas missile that probably costed a couple $100 to make. Each one of those.
But if they, but
wait. Each one of those Iron Dome missiles that Israel launches up, they're really cool. They dance, they talk to each other, they can spin around and target, Hamas missiles. But those cost $2 million. So it's a $2 million missile going up at maybe
$30,000, bro.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If the Jews were really wanting to kill them, they would just be using cheap weapons. They'd be turning their urine into urea nitrate, and they'd be making cheap bombs. And
they do make cheap bombs. They do make cheap weapons. They make them out of water pipes and mud huts, basically. They do that. That's the reason.
Wait a minute. You're saying that the Israelis have stuff made of water pipes and mud huts? Israel?
No, you idiot. Obviously, the Gazans. There's countless videos of this.
But I was talking about Israel. If Israel really wanted to kill them, they wouldn't just use fancy weapons. They'd use cheap weapons.
Hold on.
The reason why they can't use cheap weapons is because already with the $2 million missiles, they can't stop Hamas rockets from entering their airspace. Even with that, if they had cheap weapons, if Israel had to...
Yeah, but they can fly over and bomb.
Listen, if Israel had to attempt to exist without U.S. financing and the laundering of billions and billions of dollars each and every year, Israel would cease to exist immediately.
Hold on. I have to address the absurdity of what's being said. You're somehow implying that the reason Israel builds more expensive bombs is because these bombs have safety measures which prevent more civilian casualties. No, the opposite is true. The reason their bombs are more expensive is because you need more expensive bombs to kill more people per capita. I mean, economically speaking. So the idea, why doesn't Israel build cheaper bombs? Because they wouldn't be able to kill as many people as they are if they had those cheaper bombs. It's that simple.
Haas, quick question. You really don't think that Israel would be able to wipe out 2 million people right now if they really wanted to?
No. I believe they could, but not without being wiped out the same day. Because every single Muslim country,
they can make it look like a false flag attack. They can make it look like some Hamas.
No one will buy that. No one's going to buy that. No one's going to buy that.
Who's going to say you're going to investigate a nuke site They could blame it on Hamas.
The
Say
Zionist
Hamas bought,
entity.
Hamas bought one
If
from
the
Pakistan
Zionist
or
entity
something.
decided to wholesale kill all 2 million people, they would be wiped off the face of the earth the same day by every single Muslim country. Not because those Muslim governments want to do it, because their people would force them. There would be no Israel to speak of the same day, and America couldn't prevent it either. You cannot hold back the wrath of 1 billion people. You can't do it, okay? Don't care how much nuclear weapons you have. So-called Israel would not exist the same day. So that's why they don't do this. They know better. They're smarter than to do this. If they could get away with that, they would do it in a heartbeat. You know, they're not doing this for humanitarian reasons. Not only do they circumvent every opportunity to be humanitarian where they can, they go out of their fucking way to be cruel and sadistic in their response. So the idea that they're just holding back because they're such good people, this is nonsense. This is total nonsense.
Okay, what about the Palestinians in Israel right now that are in Tel Aviv? Why aren't they concentrating them into Gaza or the West Bank and then destroying
It's
them?
the same way, because Israel would lose even more face than it has around the world, and nobody would tolerate that. Nobody would turn a blind eye to that.
Well,
It's not even
realize
just the Muslim and Arab world at that point. I mean, the real international community, Israel become a pariah state immediately. I mean,
you do realize that the Palestinians right now that are living in Tel Aviv and Herzliya and Ra'anana, you realize that they are against what Hamas is doing, and they are for what Israel is doing in Gaza right now. You realize that, right?
That's not true.
Dude, I'm literally here right now. You're going to tell me it's not true?
There is no way of knowing whether that would be true or not, because Israel has criminalized being even ideologically, not only being ideologically in favor of Hamas, but just consuming Hamas propaganda will land you in prison now. So you wouldn't know if it was true. I promise they wouldn't be telling you or anyone you know or anything that could be detected by the Israeli government. So you wouldn't know.
Right now,
you're going to tell me I don't know. I literally live on Allen 29. I'm telling you right now, my address in front of everyone.
Yeah, you're in Israel. So right now, as we sit here and do this space, the Zionist terrorists are currently launching the single largest raid on the West Bank since this whole thing began, October 7th. The crazy thing about that is they claim they're fighting Hamas, but Hamas is not even in the West Bank. So why would they be doing that? It makes no sense. It is about this collective punishment of the Palestinian people and stealing their land and imprisoning and torturing them.
Hamas is actually in Jenin, bro. Like, I don't know what you're saying. Like, Hamas is in Jenin. They're in Shechem. They're in Ramallah. It seems like you guys have never been to Israel. It's crazy.
There is no serious fighting contingency of Hamas in these regions. And we all know that the majority of the people in Gaza support Hamas. That's where Hamas's base is. That's where their fighting forces are. The idea that they would go and they've already massacred 100 plus civilians in the West Bank since this began. It's simply about the further repression and terrorization of these people.
They've massacred 100 plus terrorists, not civilians. You got to change the words, Jackson.
So are women and children terrorists?
If a 15-year-old is holding a gun, yes, 100% a terrorist.
What about the 4-year-olds in Gaza that they bombed?
No, they're not terrorists, but unfortunately, you can't be using them as human shields.
But what about, how are they using them as a human shield if, as they admitted yesterday, they admitted that they targeted the family of the Al Jazeera journalist. They said, yeah, we knew his family was there. We generally know who we're targeting, obviously not 100%.
I mean, even better yet, what right do you have to call Hamas terrorists then if it's the Zionist entity that's using the so-called Israeli civilians as human shields?
Well, Hamas
Who's
could
the
always
terrorist
release Hamas. If they really wanted the bombing to stop, I think that they would release the hostages, because as long as they have them,
if Israel doesn't want any of this to happen, they should just give a Palestinian state to these people and free all the people that they've imprisoned.
I think you're overlooking the fact that by every standard of international law, Israel is an occupying power. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if they release the hostages right now, they lose all leverage, period. They lose every deterrent. One of the big factors in the inability for the IDF to wage a ground invasion is those hostages. Second of all of the thousands of people, even more than that, of Palestinians being held in prisons in so-called Israel, many of whom are there unlawfully, they want an exchange. So let's not pretend this isn't the middle of a war. War is ugly. Hostage taking of civilians, it's a horrible, ugly business, but it's war. And the war, we have to understand the factors behind it and why it's happening before we can lay claim of a moral judgment on one person or the other.
So according to you, kidnapping a 6-month-old baby is perfectly fine, right?
It is a hideous consequence of a hideous war, and you're only looking at one side of that war.
Does
That's
that
the
standard
problem.
apply to both sides, though?
No, it doesn't, because one side is an aggressor, one side is an unjust and unlawful entity, and the other side are people fighting for their homeland and fighting for their people to be free. So no, it's not the same.
I mean, that sounds like a civil case that should be worked out in court somewhere.
If it was possible that this could be worked out in any court of law whatsoever that held to any consistent standard of any kind whatsoever, there would be no Zionist state, because it wouldn't have been able to have been established in the first place during the 1930s, when the importation of Jewish immigrants by the British Empire was violating even Woodrow Wilson's and the League of Nations notion of the national right to self-determination. If there was any court of law whatsoever to litigate the existence of the state of Israel, there would be no state of Israel. And it is precisely the fact that there is no such court that the Palestinian people have to resort to the means that they're currently employing.
So does that mean that Israel now has to resort to the means that they're currently employing?
The fact that they're doing that proves that how illegitimate that state and the project behind it was to begin with. They're the ones who set upon creating this illegitimate, illegal state. And the fact that they need to employ all of these criminal, barbaric means to defend it proves that its creation was never justified from the very beginning.
Well, whatever the status of their state is, be one thing or the other, as long as Hamas is holding those hostages, the guys with the planes and the bombs have all the justification they need.
Look, in their head, of course. But as Americans, because me and Jackson are Americans, what we're really of practical significance we want to get home is, we're not advocating for America to come and dissolve the state of Israel, because the organic and indigenous regional forces will do that on their own. We are saying that there is no reason whatsoever, not a moral reason, not an ethical reason, not even an ideological reason, and certainly not a material reason why the United States should be involved in this whatsoever. There is no reason whatsoever. Every argument about Israel being a victim and being under attack is nonsense, and I've already demonstrated that. So, given these facts, it is a criminal robbery of the American people that even a single cent is sent to the Middle East to support this criminal and illegitimate entity. And if American tax dollars cease flowing, then the criminal Zionist project will no longer be able to perpetuate itself, and we will see historical justice be done and the establishment of a Palestinian state.
So basically, if we turn our back on Israel, they'll kill them.
No, that's not necessarily true. What they will kill is a criminal and illegitimate system, just like the ANC killed the system of apartheid in South Africa. Not necessarily all the white people in South Africa, but the criminal, racist, and illegitimate state called Israel will indeed cease to exist. And it will cease to exist one way or another. This cannot continue forever.
How many people are going to have to die for that
to happen?
You think? How many lives do you think that'll cost?
I don't think the people living in quote-unquote Israel are going to, in mass numbers, give their lives to protect this vein. I mean, already they're leaving in mass numbers.
Yes, we already have the answer to that. You have some homemade rockets being fired towards Tel Aviv, and already you have the mass flocking of these people who, it's not their land. That's the reason why they're leaving, because they're not willing to give their lives for it. They're already leaving and going back. They're already leaving and going back to Berlin and Warsaw, wherever they were living prior. And we all know that's the fact, because everyone knows someone who lives in Israel, and they're a bunch of people who frankly don't have any grounds, any roots in the land. So the idea that we should be continuing to fund Israel $9 billion every year, $14 billion just this past week, there's nothing beneficial that comes of this as an American. So you pose the question, what will happen to Israel then? Frankly, I don't care what happens to Israel. I really don't. Why should I care as an American whether or not the Zionist project continues or whether or not it ends? I mean, I don't care. I want zero foreign aid to Israel, defund Israel, and we all know what's going to happen when that happens. No response to that. I don't care. Haz, do you care if Israel continues?
As an American, absolutely not. Now, I come from an Arab background with an Arab family, so I do understand the sentiment of the people in that region. But am I going to put that before America? No. So just as an American, just that alone, I am outraged how much we have sacrificed the interests of the country we live in, of our people, the American people, to perpetuate this vain and ridiculous project of Zionism.
So I'm playing out what you guys just said in my head here, and I'm trying to figure out what do you think happens when the peaceful pacifist people that live in Israel all leave, like you guys described, and all that's left is those that are willing to fight?
They form a government, they govern on their own, they take the land, and they are able to live on their own without having to rely on aid.
No, I'm talking about the only Jews left in Israel still fighting for the state of Israel are the ones that want to fight, and they no longer have to worry about their loved ones that are pacifist and peaceful.
The same thing that happens in every single war. Some sort of a peace settlement is made, and then those who want to stay will stay. I mean, you just saw the hostages this week. You had two grandma hostages that were released by Hamas, and they had tea and cookies together, and she shook his hand, the Hamas fighter's hand, before she left. I mean, no one wants to live in a constant state of war. And frankly, most of these Israelis that are currently living on the land, I mean, I'm sure a lot of them wants the full eradication of the Palestinian people and this problem to just go away.
And who's going to vote against them when the peaceful pacifist Israelis leave?
Well, you're operating under the assumption that, look, put it this way. I don't believe that the people living in Israel, whether they're on the right or the left, will die for the Zionist project in the last instance. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. When they're cornered against the wall, I think they will choose a peace settlement and choose to survive rather than drag out a war they know they can't win. And by the way, they won't be allowed to drag that war out. Why? Because at that point, we are going to see an intervention of international powers to mediate an agreement of some kind. Perhaps the UN or something else.
The Arab support for Hamas seems rather superficial from my perspective. A lot of talk.
Well, which Arabs are you referring to? Are you referring to governments or are you referring to populations? Because the only reason you're seeing the lip service in favor of the Palestinian people from the King of Jordan and from other Arab leaders is because of pressure from the Arab population. So that's the reason they even have any support for the Palestinians whatsoever, is because of the people, not the governments. So if you want to ask your average Arab in any country whether they sympathize with Hamas or they support Hamas, the answer is a resounding yes with two thumbs up.
And I agree with you based upon what I've seen over the last couple of weeks, that is the perspective, or at least the consensus. But let me ask this. How many of them are willing to show up to Gaza and die for Palestine?
None.
Most of them. There are people there are thousands of fighters in Iraq who are going to the Golan Heights right now in preparation for a war with Israel, many of whom do imagine they're going to die for it.
Anybody that wants to be a martyr, it seems like, could show up to Gaza right now.
You don't understand. Okay, I'm going to explain to you something. You seem to not understand the region. You think that these states that were created by Sykes-Picot represent people's identity in the last instance, and it doesn't. So there's the Arab cause, there's the Muslim cause, and this is what people actually care about. This is why Hezbollah fighters were willing to go and die in Syria, even though they weren't Syrians. Okay, this is why Iranians are in Iraq helping them fight against ISIS. This is the form of regional solidarity that exists, which goes beyond the borders that exist. So if you want to ask me in the final instance, will Arabs go in? I mean, the Taliban is saying they're willing to go and fight. Pakistanis are willing to go and fight.
Hamza Chimaev,
The form of
Russian
solidarity that exists in that region is ancient. This goes back to the pre-modern, very large empires and civilizations that existed, where the borders we see now didn't exist. These were one people in one civilization with differences. Of course, you had the Safavid Persians and the Ottoman Turks, but it was a far more integrated region than what you're seeing now. And that integration is going to rear its head one way or another.
And I'll also say that just this past week, Hamza Chimaev, the Dagestani Chechen fighter from Russia, he won his UFC bout, and he's a star of the UFC. He literally said in his post-fight statement when he won, he said, I wasn't born to wear little shorts and fight in a cage. I was born to go and defend my greater cause, go and defend my brothers in Palestine and die if I have to. He said he's asking Ramzan Kadyrov for his blessing to go fight for the people of Gaza. So there's a lot of people who are willing to sacrifice their lives for this all across the world. And I guess I just put the question forward one more time. Why, as an American, should I give a fuck about Israel and whether or not it exists?
Well, Jackson, that's for you to wrestle with on your own. But I have to ask.
No. It's not. It's really not, because you're saying that we should go defend them and we should continue to supply them.
Well, I'm saying that we are, Jackson. That America just heard.
Let's speak in terms of responsibility and ask the following question: in terms of American self-interest, is it smart that we antagonize the entire Muslim world in the name of defending Israel? What is it better for America to have good relations with the entire Muslim world, or to have sour relations with the entire world? Is the so-called state of Israel worth losing all of that? Just from the perspective of self-interest.
Talk. Here's the thing. Talk is cheap. Okay.
Please answer the question. From the perspective of American self-interest, is it wiser to have good relations with the entire Muslim world, or is it wiser to have horrible relations with the entire Muslim world in the name of defending this vain, artificial, and synthetic project called Israel? Which is wiser? You have to choose one.
Well, of course, we want to have good relations with everybody. But we heard there was a fight going on, and we sent in aircraft carrier groups and all that. Now
Incorrect.
I hear.
Should anyone take responsibility for that? Is there any responsibility here? Or are we going to treat it like a force of nature where there's no responsibility on anyone's part?
Also, to act like the United States hasn't propped up Israel's entire military and government for decades, and just saying, oh, they just sent two U.S. carrier strike groups over there. No, I mean, Israel would not be it would not exist today if it were not for the U.S. military support each and every year. So why do you think that the U.S. should piss off the entire Arab world, who controls a lot of the world's oil resources and gas resources, and do all of this and send all of our money and weapons over there and potentially start a world war for something as ridiculous as Israel? I don't care about Israel. Why do you care so much about Israel?
The same question could be posed to the Arab world. Why do they want to fracture the relationship over this rift?
Well, I can answer that as an Arab, I guess. I can answer that because the form of solidarity that you see in that world, it's just like the solidarity I, as a Michigander, would have to people in Idaho. Okay, it's one civilization. It's not like these are people who are alien to each other. It's one people. The borders you see in the Middle East don't really reflect actual differences of the civilization. They were created in Sykes-Picot by Western colonial powers, and for 1,000 years you had a integrated region. There was no sense of a difference between each other. So that solidarity, that's an organic solidarity. The solidarity America, or our politicians at least, have toward the so-called state of Israel and the Zionist project doesn't make any sense. What is organic about that solidarity? Nothing. What do we have in common with the so-called state of Israel? What real civilizational tie do we have to them?
I'll ask the question one more time, Benjamin. You live in Texas. Why do you think that we should be sending tens of billions of dollars in military aid and weaponry over to Israel? And why do you think we should piss off the whole Arab world and nuke ourselves based on resource wealth just to protect Israel? Why do you care about doing all of this for Israel as an American?
Well, Jackson, I realize we're all Americans here. I'm a Texan, as you pointed out, and I guess as a Texan, turning my back, while these guys get killed off, just doesn't seem like a very Texan thing to do. Just doesn't.
So you think so as an American, you say you don't want to see people die, but
well, I think you guys made it pretty clear that they're going to cease to exist if we turn our backs on them. So as a Texan,
most of these
I'm not turning my back on them. You know what I'm saying? Like you can bring the whole world, World War III, World War IV, ain't happening. I'm not turning my back on them.
Okay, so you're going to turn your back on the Palestinian people who are being bombed to smithereens because there's a lot of innocent civilians being killed.
Jackson, the second that they release those hostages, I'm going to call for the bombing to stop.
Wait, isn't Hamas right now claiming that in exchange for a ceasefire and a cessation to the bombings, they'll release all of the hostages? Aren't they saying that right now?
No,
I don't know. I don't know what Hamas has put in writing and what they haven't.
They never said such a thing.
They did say that.
Pull up the evidence.
Okay, I will. It was the Hamas leader guy. He said it in an interview just the other day. I think it was
Sky News.
BBC. Sky News.
It was the Sky News interview where he says he offers a release of the hostages in exchange for an end to the bombardment.
It's amazing when white nationalists align with Islamic fundamentalists. It's a beautiful thing to watch and see. And just to answer your question, the reason
it's an incredible thing to see evangelical Christian fundamentalists align with Zionists. That's also pretty baffling.
Give them a little runway.
It's pretty fucking baffling to see actual neo-Nazis from the Azov battalion ally with Zionists. I think that's also a curious alliance.
Give the guy some runway. He just got here.
Listen, I've been listening to you guys for a while. So you guys are talking a whole lot of nonsense. America supports Israel, right? Because America supports its self-interest. And you could
is that the self-interest of the billionaire class? Is that the self-interest of the Wall Street parasites, or is it the self-interest of the average Joe living in Palestine, Ohio?
You could giggle all you want, right? At the end of the day, America serves American interests, right? And they stand with Israel because Israel serves America's interest. When it comes to technology, when it comes to innovation, when it comes to military inventions, there's nothing like it on the planet. There's not a group of people that per capita put out.
I have to put an end to this nonsense. We all know that the so-called state of Israel.
This is why your whole Palestinian lie falls apart, because it's predicated on lies.
Okay. So the so-called tech capital of Israel.
You say the so-called Israel exists, right? And you
no, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, really?
No, it doesn't.
Why are you crying for the people of Gaza, right?
I'm not crying. You're gonna be crying. You're gonna be crying in 5 years. I'm not gonna be crying. You will be.
Palestine doesn't exist, nor did it ever exist, right?
Yeah, it does.
It's really, who was the leader?
Palestine exists.
Name me three famous Palestinian people prior to
1948. Zadie, I have a question. So Zadie, where are you currently located, just roughly?
I'll be Canada.
Okay, so
there we go. The Canadian. There we go. Why don't you have Canada go die for Israel? Why do Americans have to go die for this?
Nobody asked for Americans to die for Israel. America.
That's what they're going to have to be doing if we get dragged into a regional conflict.
Well, listen, America has no issues getting dragged into regional conflicts. And
I think the American people do, but that's the difference. I think the American people do. I think the American people do have a problem with that, actually.
So there's already 12,000 men and women on the two U.S. carrier strike groups in the Eastern Mediterranean right now. So why do you think that we as Americans, or Canada for that matter, who just hosted an actual Waffen SS soldier in their government parliament a few weeks ago, why do you think that any of us should care about the future and the existence of Israel? Because I'm trying to wrap my head around this. As an American, I don't care if Israel exists.
Well,
And you
clearly,
wait. You said something about the self-interest of Israel's technological advancements. By the way, technological advancements that wouldn't be occurring if we didn't fund them. Israel would not even exist if we didn't fund them and provide them with
that's
military
not
aid.
true.
So
That's not true. In
you
1948,
think,
in 1948, America had an embargo on Israel. They gave them no support. The support came in the 60s.
but I'm not
They
talking
did
about
one sec.
1948. I'm
So
talking
That's
about
not even true.
2023.
you guys,
Israel, the United States was the
you
first
see, you
country
guys,
to grant de
you guys
jure
have, you
recognition.
guys have a title, right? Exposing Zionists. Well, guess what? I'm a proud Zionist, the proudest Zionist you'll probably ever meet, right? And I'm here to have a conversation, and we could talk. But it seems like you'd rather have a Hamas echo chamber, right? You
If
wanna
we're
sit on
having a
Hamas's
Hamas echo chamber, why
you
are you
wanna
allowed
sit
to
on
speak?
Hamas's lap
I
rather than
asked
have
you
a
a question.
conversation.
I asked you a question. I'm giving you an opportunity to explain yourself. Why should America shoot ourselves in the foot and piss off the whole Arab world and dump our military supplies out for this fake country and cut ourselves off from cheap
Again,
energy? If
you talking about first of
no, no,
all,
no. I'm asking
America. One sec.
I'm asking a question.
I'm
Why should we do all of that if it literally doesn't matter to any single American whether or not Israel exists?
So again, that's a very long-winded question with a lot of points, but I'll try to answer it as best as I can. Um, America serves its interest. Again, secondly, there are
What are
American
the
hostage.
interests?
One sec. Again, you got to have give me
Come
a
on,
second.
we're going to simplify the question. How is
No,
it in America's
guy.
self-interest to support Israel? Very
Okay.
quickly, go
So
ahead.
currently, it's America's self-interest to support American citizens and do what they can to help American citizens. There are dozens of American citizens that are currently being held hostage by the scum of the earth known as Hamas.
Then,
Right?
as long as America
America.
stops, if America stops
You see
funding
how
the Zionist
you
criminals,
see how.
they'll all come home.
But
They'll all come
can't
home.
you? Do you want an answer? Do you want to have an emotional outburst every
It
time I
seemed
speak?
like you're saying this is about the hostages. If America wants the hostages back, they can get them back. Just stop
Like
funding Israel. You'll get the hostages back. Good
I
deal.
mean, do you speak for Hamas, or they put that in writing?
No,
I mean,
we just
given that Hamas has
we
already
just
publicly agreed that they'll release all hostages in exchange for an end to bombardment, I'm more than willing to believe that they will
I'm
release every single U.S.
I'm sure you would
citizen
believe
in their
Hamas. Hamas, you
possession
said
right
two
now,
thumbs up.
as long as the
Two thumbs
U.S.
up from the
stops
Arab world,
supporting
right?
Israel.
At least you're being an honest Arab, and you're saying that you guys support Hamas, the scum of the earth. So at least let's have an honest conversation and talk about how Hamas.
So you need to stop having your Zio tantrum. Yes, I'm an Arab. You're a Zionist. You
I'm
support
a
the baby
Jew.
killing
You could call
Zionist
it Jew.
criminals.
You could call me a
No,
Jew.
you're not a Jew. You're not a Jew. I don't recognize you as a Jew. You're a
Well,
Zionist.
I
The
so
Torah
tell you
so
Jews
what.
don't
we'll ask the
I
acknowledge
tell
you.
question.
you what.
We'll ask the
The
I'll
Torah
tell you
Jews
what.
hate you. The Torah Jews don't claim you. You're not a Jew.
So we'll ask the question one more time. Why is it? Because you said it's in America's self-interest to make sure there's a Israeli state. How is that in any way, shape, or form in America's interest to dump out all our resources, shoot ourselves in the foot to preserve the state of Israel?
so first off, um, nobody is shooting anybody in the foot. There is no need for American soldiers to get involved. Israel, time and again, throughout every single war, fought off 4, 5, 6 Arab armies off on its own. Every single time. It happened in 1948, happened in 1967, happened again in 1973. Every war the Arabs waged against the Jews, they lost time and again. They've been sore losers, and America didn't need to intervene.
Hezbollah. Hezbollah.
Again, you see your emotional outbursts. You can't contain yourself, right?
Okay,
No, but again, let me
we
just.
can
Sorry,
I
I
haven't
just
answered.
coughed.
I didn't
I
wait,
even.
just
wait,
coughed.
wait,
Sorry.
We can get into the details of the previous wars if
But
we
do you
want
want an
to, but
answer to the question? And
yes,
I gotta
yes.
answer without being
The
interrupted,
answer.
right?
I want an answer to the question, considering the fact that U.S. Special Forces were already killed in their incursion a few nights ago into Gaza. You said that U.S. troops don't need to be involved. They already are involved. So how is it in America's self-interest to do all this?
So the people that are around Israel, right, see America as their enemy. This is why America supports its self-interest, because you know what they call Israel? They call Israel the little Satan, right? And who's the big Satan? America. The same
Because they
people.
do shit like supporting Israel.
Again, man, this guy with his emotional outbursts. You can't contain yourself. You guys, right, got to understand one thing. America it only serves themselves and nobody else. Just like you, Jackson, or this guy has. You guys don't give a shit about the power.
Okay, but you're not answering the question. You're just like being redundant. You're saying, well, the Arab world doesn't like us. Yes, I understand the Arab world doesn't like the U.S. government. They have no qualms with the American people, but they have qualms with the American government because we're funding terrorism against them. So, again, I'll just simply ask the question one more time. Why is it in America's self-interest to preserve the Israeli state, even when, as you just mentioned, continuing to do so pisses off the Arabs?
Okay, so
You got to unmute.
I was still muted. It was glitching. The same people that want to destroy the state of Israel and kill the Jews, the Yahud, they want to kill Americans, not the government. They want to kill American citizens, and they've done
Why?
it before, right?
What's your evidence?
What's my evidence? What
Yeah.
happened to the Beirut bombings?
You mean when there was an occupation by U.S. troops in Beirut
an
directly?
Arab talking about occupation. You guys occupied all of the Levant and all of Northern Africa, right? You guys came from Arabia. Don't
Okay,
speak
hold
about
on.
occupation.
Hold
But
your
see,
horses.
again,
Hold
you
your
can't.
horses.
You guys don't want to
Okay,
get an answer to the
you
question.
can't control yourself. Hold your horses. All right.
You guys are hilarious. At least have an honest conversation. Are you scared to have an actual debate with somebody who knows facts, or you only want to talk to people
I am more than
who
happy to
listen
get
to your
into.
propaganda
I'm
and
more
your
than happy to
bullshit?
get into. Okay, you seem
Listen
nervous
to me.
right now. You seem
Listen
really
to me.
nervous.
And yet, nobody's nervous. The same people that want to kill Jews want to kill Americans.
That's
They
not
announce
true.
it
That's a
openly.
pile of
They
nonsense.
announce
That's
it
not true.
openly. It's not a secret.
The only groups that I can think of that might have that mentality are groups like ISIS, which both Israel and the United States armed and supported in Syria.
So I'll
So
tell
I'm
you this
not
to
sure
Jackson
who
and
else.
Tahaz. You guys sound like self-hating Americans who don't want to serve American interests and are okay with Americans getting taken hostage by radical
I actually think I think it's the highest expression of
Wait, you
patriotism
guys have never
to
heard
argue on
the
behalf of.
Death to America chants? I mean, you've never heard that? Somebody post the Death to America chants in the comments.
All right,
They're
we're
plain stupid.
having a Zio soy out. Jackson, can you mute these people very briefly so I can address this?
Done. I think I
Oh,
muted.
just screaming out of nowhere. Anyway, I think it's the highest principle of patriotism to recognize there's a difference between the interests of the American people and the criminal ruling class that is driving us into wars and doing things that are not in the interests of the American people. So saying I'm not a patriot because I'm critical of U.S. policy, by the way, which is in part formed by the Israel lobby, is just nonsense. Second of all, you claim that Arabs intrinsically want to kill Americans for no reason, and they just want to do it. Does anyone buy that? That's so stupid. Like, who would fucking believe that? Based on what? There was a lot of anger in that region toward America, but it's specifically because of American support for Israel. Give me a single example of Arabs in the Middle East wanting to embark on a campaign to come to America and kill Americans whatsoever in any form before 1948.
Okay.
It's such a stupid and ridiculous.
Several years ago, there was a shooter that killed Americans in Texas
I
because they
said
wanted
before
to.
1948. I said before 1948.
Before 1948?
Correct.
Yes.
When the so-called State of Israel was created.
America didn't really have much interest in the Middle East at that time.
Well, they were the first country to grant de jure recognition.
Can you name me 3 famous so-called Palestinians prior to 1948?
Don't pivot, and please, because you just said that Arabs and Muslims have an intrinsic drive, like an instinct, to just come and kill as many Americans as they can. And I'm not sure where you're getting that from.
I'll give you a prime example.
So Israel, hold on, let me get this straight. Israel is protecting Americans from the crazy Arabs who want to come kill us all. Is this the nonsense slop that you really feel?
No. So I
idiots in
asked
this
you,
country that actually believe that.
I asked you a question, and it
Yeah.
literally correlates directly to the question you asked. All right, I'll tell you who was the leader of the Arabs, because I asked you who was a famous Arab or a leader. You couldn't give me one, so I'll give you one. Anybody could Google him.
You know what Zadie can't say right now? Zadie can't name 3 famous Israelis that existed before 1948. So I don't know why he's going off on this tangent right now, but the question, Haz, repeat the question one more time.
Yeah, it's actually really simple. Why is it in America's self-interest to support a so-called Israel?
You got on mute to talk.
So
Zadie has.
I already told you guys several times that you guys don't want to have an honest conversation. It's clearly a censored echo chamber. So you guys are very being.
Okay, well, you told me that you think it's because that Arabs and Muslims are going to just come kill all Americans because they hate Americans, because they hate our way of life, like George W. Bush said, right? Is that the hill you're dying on right now?
Who? I never said that.
Okay, so why is it our self-interest?
I never said those words. What I said is the same people that want to kill Jews want to kill Americans, right? And you could go down in history, right?
Okay.
But at the end of the day, today, the same people that call for the destruction for the state of Israel, the same Arabs call for the destruction of America, right?
And that is entirely because of our support for Israel.
That's nonsense as well. There was
Then
no support.
what
There
else
was
is
no
the reason?
support of Israel that had to do with them being in Afghanistan or Iraq. That was all America on its own, right? There was no correlation with them taking out Gaddafi.
Actually, the
and
Taliban, the Taliban, first of
Well,
all, was hostile. Actually, the Mujahideen, which was funded by the United States for a long time, was gotten rid of by the Taliban, who part of the big reason they opposed the U.S. was because of U.S. support for Israel, actually. So can you name a single reason why the Muslim world or the Arab world would have animosity toward the U.S. unless our government is engaging in criminal acts that don't serve the interests of the American people? I mean, why would they inherently have a problem with the American people?
You're the Arab. You tell me what's your issue with Americans.
I am American, okay? You're a Canadian. You're not even Are you the Canadian?
I'm Israeli. I was born in Israel.
Okay, and you live in Canada.
So what's your point? I live in America as well. What's your point?
So you're not a fucking American. I don't have dual loyalties like you do. You're identifying as an Israeli. Stop leeching off of our country and our
You're
taxes.
identifying as an American who's an Arab. You're just literally being a hypocrite in the
Because
same breath of air.
because Arab
You
is
know
an
why you're a
ethnicity.
hypocrite?
Because Arab is an
your whole
ethnicity.
argument is predicated on lies. You're not gonna have an honest convo.
Because Arab
Right?
is
The
just an
honest
ethnicity.
convo is right. Arabs, unfortunately, and not all of them, but some of them that have been radicalized want to kill Jews, and they call it out openly. And those same
Okay,
people,
if that's true, if there's some
if
Arab,
that's true,
sure. If there's some Arab gene that makes them want to kill Jews, why didn't they kill Jews in Iraq at the height?
they did.
Hold on,
They
at
did.
the height. I'm not talking about during the 1948, the 1940s. I'm talking about throughout the entire history of the Arabs and the Muslims. Why didn't they? Why were Jews allowed to rise to the rank of viziers and actual governors in Andalus and in Egypt?
If as Zaidi, the Zionist Canadian, believes that all Arabs want to destroy all Jews, why did they treat the Israeli hostages so well when Hamas took them in? And that's not per me, that's per the actual hostages that have discussed this.
So again, you guys keep asking question after question.
You muted yourself. Zionist IQ levels, can't figure out a mic.
No, it said muted by a host. So, and you know we invented this phone that you're using, so you're welcome. Now,
you guys also invented OnlyFans. Don't get so big in your britches.
Well, you love jerking off to fucking all kinds of things, right? Because you're a sick fuck. So, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't judge. You're free in America.
Palestinian babies.
So you guys put gay flags next to American flags.
I have a question.
Hold on, guys.
You're not answering my question. You're not. What if Arabs want?
You don't want an answer.
If Arabs want to kill all Jews, why didn't they kill the hostages? Why did they treat them so well?
So again,
when did he say all Arabs want to kill all Jews?
I literally never said that.
You said that Arabs say they
I
killed
said there
Jews.
are some Arabs that are radicalized, and I clearly
Okay,
made
hold
a
on.
distinction
So this
to
is
say not all
extremely
Arabs.
this is
And
extremely
again, do you
dishonest.
see again?
You know what?
You're insinuating.
Some people are radicalized.
Okay, but hold
I
on.
think
Hold
that
on.
much is true. We can
Can you-
recognize
okay,
at
okay.
least that much.
There are Arab Muslims currently fighting in the IDF forces to put an end to
Okay.
Hamas's existence.
Let's
So we
let's
have no issues
simplify
with
this.
Arabs. We have
Right.
issues with radical ideologies and fundamentalists that really care about lining their own pockets more than serving their own
Okay,
people.
okay, hold on.
Right? Because Hamas, similar to
Hamas.
Arafat, they're all
Hamas.
billionaires. They're all billionaires while the people suffer. It's Israel and the Jews that care for the Palestinians more
Okay,
than anybody
Jackson,
else.
can you briefly mute this guy? He's just gibbering. The thing about Hamas, and FYI, if you're a Semite indigenous to the region, it's called Hamas. You don't say Hamas. Okay, that's how the Semites indigenous to the region pronounce it. But in any case, I want to tell you that you said that some Arabs are radicalized where they want to kill Jews. Is there any example outside of the Arab-Israeli conflict that leads Arabs or Muslims in significant numbers to have animosity toward Jews whatsoever? Is it really because they're Jews that these Arabs or Muslims have a problem? Or is it because they happen to be partaking in the colonial project called Israel, which displaced and uprooted them? Now, just like the ANC had a problem with the Boers upholding apartheid, that doesn't mean because they were white. It means these are the people who were dispossessing them and oppressing them. So it's not because they're Jews. If these were Finnish people who came and established the state of so-called Israel in the same way that foreign Jews did, the animosity would be equal. And it's within the context of that conflict. There's no problem Arabs or Muslims have with a Jew living in America or Mexico or even Russia, just because they're Jewish. There's none.
I'll add also, I asked the question to Zaidi the Zionist, why is it in America's interest to support the existence of Israel? And no answer was given other than Israel has a profound ability to develop technology. That was answer number one. Answer number two, after much prodding by myself, was that the Arab world is pissed off at Americans because we fund terrorism against them. And Zaidi then went on with the third answer, saying many Arabs and many Arabs say death to America and death to Jews. Not all, but many, as you said. Okay, I'm just gonna debunk that whole argument. I mean, I'm the number one man on X on Twitter right now worldwide. By the end of the month, I'll have like 8 billion impressions, millions of new followers, and pretty much all of these are Arabs. I'm an American, and they love me because I want peace with them and I want to do business with them. I don't want to fund Al Qaeda or ISIS or Israeli terrorism against them. So your whole argument that the Arab world hates America is debunked. They love America. They love Americans. They just don't love our government. And it's up to Americans to change our government. If Americans change our government to one that's not hostile to the Arab world, not hostile to Russia, Russia won't hate us. Russia will love us and will want to do business with us again. My grandfathers fought arm in arm with the Soviet Red Army in World War II. The Arab world will love us. They'll want to do business with us. And it won't be a hostage relationship with these people. And I think that's what we should all strive for. So they hate our government, they hate the terrorism, and they hate the war, and they just want peace. They don't want to kill us.
Are you sure the enemies of America don't like you because you're turning against America? I mean, that seems why.
The enemies of America,
They love a
the
self-hating American.
the enemies of America is the American government. I obviously have a massive American following as well. I'm an American patriot. But the enemies of America are not Russia, not Putin, not Raisi. It wasn't Soleimani. It wasn't any of the. It's not Bashar al-Assad. It's not any of these people or groups. The enemy of the American people is the deep state that is pushing for war against Russia, pushing for war via the Zionist entity in occupied Palestine. That's the enemy of America.
So again, talking nonsense, right? I could debunk what you're saying.
Okay, debunk it.
On Russian media and Russian politicians have been tossing around the idea of preemptively nuking the United States for the last 600 or something days. I mean, how do you feel about that as an American?
Is Russian media the Russian government or the Russian people, or are those just a few random voices?
Okay. So I want to add something real quick. At the end of the day, the USSR and the Soviet Union planted seeds. Americans think that the Soviet Union was destroyed and that they won and defeated the Soviet Union. In reality, um, there have been seeds that have been planted, and much of the divide and issues you see in America today are directly correlated to the communist regimes really hijacking institutions in America. And we can see that with the sentiment of the young Americans today, similar to Canadians, and it's tragic that they would rather identify as communists rather than capitalists. That didn't happen
That's
by
not
accident.
true. That's not
Jack,
true.
one
Because
second.
let me just explain
Danny.
it to you. Let me just
you,
explain it to you.
you can't,
Let me
you,
no
can I
no
finish my
no
point?
no because it was a dumb point. No institutions in America are captured by communist entities because each and every one of these so-called college blue-haired LGBTQ communists would have been lined up against a wall by Che Guevara or by Stalin, and they would have done what they would have done to them. They're not communists. I'm a communist. Haas is a communist, and we're fighting to bring communism to America. Let me just tell you how you know communism is not in America. You'll know communism is in America when a NATO entity, minus the United States, Germany, France, maybe the UK, who knows, lands on our eastern shores and wages a war against what they will define as a communist regime that's taken over the US government. There is no communism in America. There's a bunch of woke, woke leftism and socially woke politics. That's not communism. If that's communism, you know, why was the number one opponent to communists like Stalin Adolf Hitler, a man who was a homosexual, surrounded by homosexuals and transsexuals in Nazi Germany? If anything, the American left, which you're defining as communist today, is far more emblematic of Nazi Germany and their LGBTQ woke politics than Stalin or anyone else, or China for that matter. I mean, China is vehemently anti woke, and they're the most successful communist state in all of human history. The Soviet Union was extremely anti woke. Communist states today are all extremely anti woke. There's no communists in America.
To say that woke identity politics originates with Zionism in this country because for so long, any slight mild criticism of the state of Israel, they said, you're an anti-Semite, you're a bigot, you're the worst, you're a Nazi. So people started gradually just expanding outward and including more categories, including transphobia or fat phobia and stuff. But it all originated with Zionist crybabies. Isn't that crazy?
What's crazy is all you guys do is whine and crying about how Jews control everything and do this and this and that. You're
Who
literally
said that? Who
whining
said Jews
and then
control
complaining about
everything?
whining. Again, a hypocrite. And Jackson, right?
No one said Jews control everything.
Jackson.
Yeah, who said that?
I
You,
want to hear about this communist takeover of
yo, did you
America that
guys
you
ever
guys are
hear?
envisioning.
Did you guys ever
Wait.
hear?
I want to go back. Who said Jews control everything? I think Wall Street and the city of London control everything. I don't think Jews control
Well, I has
everything.
just mentioned how communism has to do with the Zionist movement, which is the
I
craziest
didn't
thing.
say when did I say that's communism? I said wokeness. I didn't say communism.
Said wokeness.
Wokeness was not tolerated in communist states. It's not tolerated in China. It's not tolerated historically in any communist state. So that has nothing to do with communism. Zionism and communism are opposed, and so I don't know what you're gibbering about.
So I don't know
So
what you're talking about.
does that mean Putin is opposed to Israel?
Putin is not a communist.
Putin literally said the worst moment in Russian history is the USSR fell. And again, you have
Right.
a Russian flag.
But the reason why he said that was because overnight you had millions of a country to not having a country. You had millions of people overnight go from being a part of a single unit, a single state, a single people, to falling into despair and misery and falling into governments that basically, economically raped the working class of their respective countries thereafter, the former Soviet states. He actually explained that, but you're leaving that part out. Putin is not a communist, although I wish he was. And I think that it's extremely disingenuous. I don't even want to say disingenuous. It's just that you're historically illiterate, trying to make the argument that wokeism is the equivalent of communism. How could you make that argument when every single communist state is vehemently opposed and does not tolerate wokeism?
Also, Israel openly brands itself as a woke country, and it's so POC and gay friendly and
And
stuff.
and
So let's
if
not talk
if you're
about who's
asking the
woke.
question about Putin's relation to Israel, it's very simple. Putin's not a communist, but he did call just this week for the establishment of a Palestinian state. So that's what he thinks about Israel.
So again, you keep speaking nonsense, and for the people in the audience that can't see it, keep getting muted, and that's why you guys don't want to have a genuine conversation. But you can't speak to Putin as if you know him or you know what he's talking about, because you don't even understand what it is to be Russian or the Russian ideology or the Russian
Have
people.
you ever been to
Now,
Russia?
yes,
How many times?
I speak Russian fluently.
Really?
So
Yeah,
you're a So you're actually a traitor to your homeland. You went to
no,
LARP as a
you
Zionist.
know what's a traitor? An Arab who talks about supporting Hamas, the same people that are oppressing Arabs in the Middle
First of
East.
all,
That is a traitor. That is
Let's
a
keep it
traitor to
serious.
their own people.
what are
Let's
you
keep
even
it serious.
babbling about?
Let's
That's
keep it
such
serious. Let's get
nonsense.
back to the point.
Why are
See how
you
emotional,
why are you a traitor to your
Jackson. Jackson,
why are
you're a
you
traitor to
wait,
America.
wait, wait.
You're a traitor to America
No.
and American ideals.
Why are you a traitor to your homeland? Putin's already called for the establishment of a Palestinian state. I don't know where your homeland is. You said you're Canadian American and now you're like trying to LARP as a Russian. So why are you a traitor to your homeland?
Traitor is somebody who claims to be an American patriot yet identifies as a communist and supports communism, which is the destruction of American ideals
Why is that a
and American
betrayal? Why is that a
values.
betrayal of America? Go
It's a
ahead.
betrayal of America because America is a capitalist society based on freedom, whereas communism is all about government control, making you guys traitors to American values and
America
American
also used to
ideals.
have slavery. America used to have
The
slavery.
same way you're a traitor to the Arabs, you're a traitor to America.
Okay,
You guys,
Jackson, mute this.
How is America a free country? I've been for speaking out against my own country and its foreign policy. I've been banned from YouTube. I've been banned from Twitch. I've been banned from Venmo. I've been banned from PayPal, all at the advisement of the Ukrainian government's Ministry of Digital Transformation. How do I know that? Because my own viewers did FOIA requests that showed that Nina Jankowicz and the Ukrainian government were discussing my banning from these platforms, and they did end up doing it. So, how is America free, as you say, if they're censoring their number one dissident who is at the same time being censored by a foreign government? That's not free. If I was free, I mean, I was just in Russia 2 weeks ago, and I was, criticizing Putin for not launching this SMO sooner than he did. I wasn't silenced. I wasn't censored. I was on Russian state TV being translated into Russian when I said it. So, I mean, I think Russia's far more free than America at this point. It's very sad because I agree America was founded on freedoms. My ancestors sailed here on the Mayflower. They founded this country. They wrote the Mayflower Compact. They fought in the Civil War, the American Revolution, and and World War II. So, I mean, I'm far more American than you. I believe in freedom. You're a traitor to your country.
I'm more of an American patriot.
Okay, so serving the ruling class, which is a tiny minority of Americans, doesn't mean you're a patriot. Repeating talking points that are funded by the ruling class doesn't mean you're an American patriot. Any more than a slave owner during the Civil War isn't an American patriot just because America had slavery. Yeah, well, they're trying to get rid of it. And we're also trying to get rid of the widespread robbery of the American people, especially in favor of sending their money and impoverishing them so they can go fund stupid fake countries like Israel and Ukraine.
Fake country with a powerful military. big, beautiful
And
nuclear
that is
bomb.
not going to help it. That's not going to help
Yeah,
it.
for sure.
That's not
You
going to
know,
make a single difference.
it's actually fascinating. Why don't you move to China? Why don't you go live in North Korea?
Why
don't
would
you
I
get
move to a different
why
country?
is it
Why would I?
that people from communist
Why would the
countries died?
Israelis?
Wait,
They
Jackson,
died to
mute
come
this
to
guy.
America
Jackson, mute this guy
when
for a
you
second.
guys
I want to
were.
respond. Why don't I just move to another country? Because unlike you, who is a globetrotter, who seems to have no allegiance to any country whatsoever, I actually live in America and am loyal to the American people because I'm an American, because this is my homeland. And I want to fight for a different system, perhaps, or a different economic system, but that doesn't make it any less American. I can't just pack up my bags like you did when you left Russia and go choose to go live in a different fucking country just because it's part of my taste. You treat countries like a person at Walmart treats DVDs in the bargain bin store. You don't have any fucking loyalty to any country. You just see them as a matter of taste. Oh, I'm going to go pack up my things and go live in this country because I prefer it. Yeah, well, countries aren't in a marketplace. It's not a matter of consumption.
Well, it
Country
seems like
is a matter of country is a.
you're willing to
Hey,
make up a country.
Wait, how do you guys?
Yeah,
Can I make one point, guys?
yeah,
Just
yeah.
one point. Okay,
This idea
literally,
that see, you went and fled to so-called Israel precisely because it's a fake and gay country. It's not a real country. The fact that you treat countries in this way is proof of the Zionist mentality not being commensurate with an organic respect for the reality of nations and countries. But go ahead.
okay, so here's the thing, right? So the point you just made, Haz, about
You got on mute.
okay, the point you just made, Haz, about how people don't want to leave their country applies just as well to the Israelis. You seem to be under the assumption that the Israelis are all migrants from other countries. They are not. The vast majority of Israelis were born in Israel at this point. So it's the only country they know. They are speakers of Hebrew. And the idea that, like, why should they be forced to leave? That's their country. That's my point.
Well, first of all, just living there doesn't mean it's your country. Second of all, South African Boers also grew up in apartheid South Africa, and that doesn't justify that the state of apartheid South Africa must continue to exist. So I don't see your point. I don't see Israel as a real country. I see people living in that country who have no commonalities with each other. I mean, I people who tell me who've been to that so-called state tell me that people are very rude. They're not very civilized with each other because they have nothing in common, because they don't have this sacred sense of bonds with each other, because they're from all over the fucking world, from a million different countries, and they don't coexist in any real way. They just go there and they subsist. And the only thing they have in common is religion. Well, that doesn't make a nation. That doesn't make a country. That doesn't define the sacred roots becoming of a country. Even America, a nation of immigrants. No matter where you are, when you come to America, everyone assimilates somehow in the sense of pursuing a similar American dream. And this is what unites us. This is what makes us one people at the very minimum. Israel, quote unquote, has nothing like that. It's a completely fake, synthetic country, and nothing holds it together except pure military force and nothing else. If the Israeli government collapsed, there would be no basis for any Israeli state at all. It wouldn't be created again. Chinese dynasties have come and gone for thousands of years, and there's always been China. It's there because it's from the people. That's not true for the Zionist project. It's a synthetic, artificial country.
Read the Torah, read the Bible, and read the Quran, and see how what you're saying is literally blasphemy and goes against all beliefs. Israel has been there for thousands of years. The kingdom of Judea, the place and homeland for the Jews, has been there based on all Abrahamic faiths.
Hold on, if that was true, if that was true, if there was any continuity,
if it was true, it is true.
If there was any continuity,
if you go against it, you're a self-hater. That's what you are. Okay. That denies history. When you dig in Israel, you find Israeli artifacts, Jewish artifacts. You don't find artifacts by a maple leaf place called Palestine that never existed. Right?
And the only descendants in that region before the so-called creation of the state of Israel and Zionism, organically, who had civilizational continuity with those kingdoms, are the Palestinians, not people who came from Europe in 1930.
I thought they're Arabs.
Can I make one more point?
Arab, by
Are
the
they not
way,
Arabs?
Arab identity encompasses all of the
Where is
Levantine Semites.
Arabia? The Kingdom of Arabia. Where was that? Was that in the
Can I
Levant,
make
where Israel
just
is?
one point? Just one
Or
point.
was
Ben.
that out in the Gulf?
You seem to be confused about what an Arab means. The Arabs encompass the Canaanite people, all these
The
other
Canaanites are
Egyptian
Arabs,
people.
really?
Can I just make one point?
Why are Egyptians
One point.
Arab? Why do you think Egyptians are Arab? Do
Because
you think
they Arabized a whole group of people.
Well, what do you think Arabization means? Do you think Arabization means a complete replacement of the original population?
Yeah, it really does.
Well, it doesn't. The same people who lived on that land lived there before
Really?
Islam. Yes, they did.
What was the Christian population prior to Islam coming? What is it now?
And they converted to Islam. It's the same people, dumbass.
All right, one second. Let's
guys
assume, Haz, I want to make a point. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you are correct on those 2 points. You are correct. One, that Israel is entirely synthetic, not a real country, and doesn't have a legitimate claim. And two, you are correct that the Arab claim is legitimate. Whatever. Okay, the Israelis don't agree with you, right? Like, the Israeli people do not agree with you. That's actually a real people with a common language that isn't spoken anywhere else. The common understanding of their history going back to the 47, forged in the understanding of constantly having to defend themselves against invaders. They don't think so. So they're not going anywhere. This isn't like the French in Algeria, where the people in Algeria can just go back to France, that they don't really, Israel is its own country.
I don't think so. I think even when you look at, for example, 1947 and 67 and this kind of stuff,
Doesn't seem like thinking is your strong suit.
Since the 1980s, there isn't a lot of real belief in Zionism as an ideology among people living in Israel who are just living there casually. Like, this is not something they're willing to die for. It's not an ideal they actually believe in. It's actually something they're very cynical about. And it's just kind of a pragmatic thing of, I'm just kind of living here to have fun or just to get by. And it's really this kind of Nietzschean last man, kind of nihilistic, consumeristic existence that they're living in. So I completely disagree with you that they have this strong sense of national identity, that they're a part of this country. But even if they did, if they were a real country, it would have to withstand a certain test, the test of being able to integrate in the region that they're in. And they have failed to do that. They are continuing to fail to do that. And it looks like, is it necessarily going to be the case that all of the people who immigrated there are going to have to be kicked out and leave? I couldn't tell you. I don't think that's necessarily true, though. I think, for example, organizations like the PFLP that work with Hamas, they don't believe that. They believe in one state for both Arabs and Jews, period. And it's not going to be Israel. It's going to be a state that respects the rights of all people. So I couldn't tell you what it's going to. I don't think it's realistic.
Dreaming.
I want to answer both of those points if I could. Zaid, could you let me answer, man? Sorry.
From the perspective of realism, one last thing. I don't think it's plausible that every single person who descended from immigrants in the current territory encompassed by occupied Palestine will have to pack up and leave. I don't think that's realistic. But I couldn't tell you. I couldn't predict the future. I just don't think it's realistic.
Well, I want to answer 2 points, right? The first is the idea that Zionists don't have a real Zionist feeling anymore. And the second is the idea that they haven't gotten a chance to integrate, right? Those are 2 big arguments, right? They haven't successfully integrated, okay? So first, on the Zionist point, I don't think you're correct, and I think particularly you are incorrect in the aftermath of October 7th. This is a 9/11 type event. The level of unity in the United States post 9/11 was dramatic and enormous. This is, as people have said, the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. The idea that the Israeli population would be completely resolved against the Palestinians is wrong. And also, I think here's another piece of evidence to suggest that you are incorrect, is the complete death of the Israeli left politically. If you were right that people were losing interest in the Zionist project and interest in peace, then the Labor Party in Israel would not have completely obliterated in recent elections. There is no meaningful Israeli left because the Israeli public is right-wing and behind the Zionist project. On your second point, which is the failure to integrate, I think you are wrong. The Abraham Accords and essentially the entire point of this Hamas massacre was they know that rapprochement with Saudi Arabia is coming, and then the world where the Saudis and the entire, all the Gulf countries have normalized relations with Israel, well, the Palestinian project is doomed. So I think on the
Okay.
contrary, it is the fact that there is this move towards integration that is spurring this desperate move.
All right,
from
I'll respond to both for the interest of time. Okay. So the first thing you said is that there's an unprecedented sense of unity since October 7th, and there's a decline of the Israeli. Well, and that by the way, decline of the Israeli left and the rise of the right wing is the trend of history. That doesn't mean that that's just part of the nihilism, though. This fanaticism and extremism perfectly corresponds with a widespread cynicism and nihilism with regard to Israel's founding project. The fact they have to take it to such extremes to sustain it proves it's not really it's not a real organic national feeling. It's like ISIS. It's just this fanatically artificial, vain charged sense of total emergency and total excitement. That's not true.
You just described the Palestinian
Jackson,
national movement.
mute this guy. Mute this guy. Mute this fucking guy. Mute this fucking guy. Okay? I let you speak, and now you want to interrupt me. See, we're not going to do this, okay? So you're going to be muted because you can't be civilized, and I'm going to continue my point. It doesn't describe the Palestinians. Palestinian enthusiasm about defending their homeland while they're under occupation in no way contradicts the organic feeling Palestinians have as a whole, by the way, and commitment to the cause they have. In the case of so-called Israel, you have what you have, a passive support of the right wing. It's not like the right wing is like everyone is preoccupied with giving a shit about the right wing. Most so-called Israelis are just like those rave goers. They are consumerists and nihilists. And on the margins, extremists who support Netanyahu and all the right wingers just take politics because nobody believes in anything. When no one believes in anything, you have the ISIS type of people take control. That's not the case for Palestine, where there's unanimous commitment and solidarity to the Palestinian project. This is not true for Israel. You're saying this is Israel's 9/11. Yeah, I'm sure there's all this brainwashing going on within Israel that's convincing people that they're under attack and it's a state of fear. But tell me why we have an unprecedented exodus from the so-called state of Israel. Why airports are packed with people packing their bags and getting the fuck out of there. That's a process that has only accelerated. I'm not saying they're becoming peace-loving leftists. I'm saying they're just getting desperate at this point. Now, to your second point on so-called regional integration, this is laughable, okay? The Emirates, the Gulf countries, and Saudi Arabia does not represent the will of the people of the Levant, okay? You want to talk about regional integration, talk about regional integration in natural Syria or geographic Syria, which is Lebanon, which is Syria itself, which is Iraq. That's the region Israel's in. The Gulf Arabs and the Gulf states, as much as they had solidarity in some sense with the Arab cause, and that's really pushing it, they're not really the same region per se. I don't know why you're using Saudi Arabia as an example of this means they're successfully integrating the region. Why? Because they normalize ties with the UAE, which is on the other side of the peninsula. That's nonsense, okay? Ask people in southern Lebanon, ask people in Iraq, or ask people in Syria what they think about that. Actual countries which are Israel's neighbors. Even Jordan. Only the Jordanian government, and by the way, this is just assuming this reflects the will of the people, and it doesn't. Even if Saudi Arabia wanted to normalize ties with the so-called state of Israel, that's because of all this artificial pressure by the American empire and by all these vested interests. That's not organic regional integration. It's not forming common ties of civilization with people who live there. It's bribing various corrupt governments to recognize you and to form ties with you. So I think your point is moot. There has been no regional integration, and it's a hostile, cancerous existence in the region, period.
Well, I think you kind of redefine regional integration to win your argument. I mean, it's really straightforward. These countries aren't democracies in the first place, so they don't need to win the will of the people of the common man. They need to win the favor of the relevant governments. If they do that, they've successfully regionally integrated. And to the extent that you're trying to narrow the scope of the region,
regions are not defined by pieces of paper of governments. They are defined by the people and the civilization of that region, which is not reducible to the formal form of statehood that they have. By the way, forms of statehood which have a tenuous foundation. Let's be honest. I mean, what is really holding these states together, if not artificial force in a lot of cases?
Self-interest, perhaps, but that's kind of the way, that actually connects to a broader point, which is what is the American interest here? Maintaining a stable regional order with Israel at the head of it. We can get into that later. I think the other point I wanted to make is
to be clear, we need to qualify that. That's not in America's interest. That's in the interest of the plutocratic Wall Street bloodsucker ruling class, which controls our government, not the American people. So we have to make a distinction.
I disagree with you totally.
It's not the interest of a guy living in East Palestine, Ohio, or someone living in Flint, Michigan, that we quote unquote maintain the status quo in the Middle East, which is to the detriment of the people living there. It's really not.
So let's ask.
It's absolutely to their
interest.
So let's just ask the question: how is it in America's self-interest to preserve an Israeli state?
Okay, why is that? Because we just saw what happens when you don't have a stable regional order in the Russia-Ukraine area. You end up spending like 10 times the amount you would spend or 20 times the amount you would spend in a single year to back somebody else in a proxy war.
Okay, but the whole reason why Russia went to war against the Ukrainian government is because of NATO encroachment on Russia's border. So literally, the United States government's stated purpose of preserving order on Russia's border, which I don't know why we have to do that. It makes no sense to me. It actually resulted in the war breaking out. So how does preserving Israel as a state benefit the American person, the American citizen? Because I'm an American citizen. I come from a long line of American citizens who founded this country. Frankly, I don't give a fuck if Israel remains or doesn't.
My speaking?
Correct.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I missed a whole bunch of what you just said. I got disconnected.
So I said just simply. So I just said simply.
Whatever. I guess if you
want to I'll just repeat it because you said you got disconnected. The reason why the Russia war broke out was because of the Western pursuit, as you put it, of maintaining dominance on Russia's border, which there's no reason to do that for America. So if we hadn't have done that and encroached NATO up to Russia's border, they wouldn't have gone in on February 24th, 2022. All right,
guys. Well, in the event, I have to go into my baby's
but let me just ask the question.
Thanks for having me.
Jackson, he can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have to go, guys. My baby's crying. Okay. Thank you for the discussion.
He couldn't. Seems like
he couldn't answer the question because he thought we were just going to say, oh, Russia is bad. You're right. No, Russia's not bad. Russia's based. And what Putin did on February 24th, 2022 should be celebrated by every American patriot. And, I think that there's parallels that can be drawn between what's happening now. But anyways, I think it's a good moment to wrap up this space. And so I guess, Haas, if you have any last words you want to say, we've been talking for a while. Everyone follow Haas, by the way. He's a great resource on all this stuff. Haas, you have any last words?
Yeah, I appreciate that. One last thing is I'd say, between using America's general imperial policies, because, does America's ruling class have any interest independent from Israel? And it's like, yeah, they do. There was a history of American imperialism before Israel created. And yeah, Israel does serve the imperialist ruling class of America, but these ruling class people they don't have a sense of patriotic loyalty to a single country. In the city of London, whether it's the Atlanticist elites in America or even a fraction of those in Israel, it's a common global cartel, and it doesn't serve the interests of it doesn't serve the interests of ordinary Jewish people, who were herded off to go to Palestine from Eastern Europe, doesn't serve the interests of the British people or the American people. So this notion that this somehow is necessary from the perspective of our interests is ridiculous. And it's not even something that's in the interest of the current American status quo, because even given the general plunder and injustice of the U.S. government against its people. Why the hell do we want to get into a war in the Middle East region
They
now?
couldn't
We can't
answer the
afford it.
question. They couldn't answer the question. We asked the question, I don't know how many times, but we asked the question and we didn't even get into it. But you talk about Iran. Iran is like what, the seventh largest oil producing nation on the planet last year. This past July, they were like, I think they were like the fourth top largest oil producing nation on the planet. BRICS is forming. BRICS, they're going to develop their own, currency that's going to eventually replace the dollar. They hold the majority of the world's resource wealth. Why on earth would we want to piss all these countries off? As Americans, I want cheap fuel. I want cheap oil. I want cheap gas. I'd like it if we could develop our own resources. But in the interim, if that means doing business with Iran and other BRICS nations and Saudi Arabia, who's a BRICS member now, I mean, that's good in the interim and we can do business with them. We're not going to be able to do good business with them and get cheap resources if we start a war against their ally for preserving the state of Israel, which no American citizen would ever know the difference if Israel was existent or non existent. It doesn't matter. So they couldn't answer the question. They couldn't answer the question also if we were to go into the billions and billions we spend on it. We were just talking before we went live. They rip away 50% of our paycheck each and every day to send to Ukraine and to send to Israel in form of taxpayer dollars. They launder it over to these leaders. And they still can't even defend themselves against Russia and Hamas, respectively. So why should we then be sending brave young American boys to go fight in their war? 12,000 men are in the Eastern Mediterranean right now wearing U.S. patches on their arms because Joe Biden and the State Department want to wage a proxy war against Hamas. I mean, in the entire Arab world and Iran as well. It makes no sense to me. They couldn't answer these questions. Frankly, as an American patriot, I see no reason to care about Israel.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in. Long space, but good space.